3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They urgently requested Festus, as a favor to them, to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. Festus answered,
Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me and press charges against the man there, if he's done anything wrong.
After spending 8 or 10 days with them, he went down to Caesarea. And the next day he convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. When Paul appeared, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him, which they could not prove. Then Paul made his defense.
I have done nothing wrong against the law of the Jews, or against the temple, or against Caesar.
Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul,
Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges?
Paul answered,
I am now standing before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I have not done any wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. If, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar.
After Festus had conferred with his council, he declared,
You have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go.
A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said,
There is a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them that it is not the Roman custom to hand over any man before he has faced his accusers and has had an opportunity to defend himself against their charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I'd expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus, whom Paul claimed was alive. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters. So I asked if he'd be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial there on these charges. When Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar.
Then Agrippa said to Festus,
I would like to hear this man myself.
He replied,
Tomorrow you will hear him.
The next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp and entered the audience room with the high-ranking officers and the leading men of the city. At the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said,
King Agrippa, and all who are present with us, you see this man. The whole Jewish community has petitioned me about him. In Jerusalem, and here in Caesarea, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. I found he had done nothing deserving of death. But because he made his appeal to the emperor, I decided to send him to Rome. But I have nothing definite to write to his majesty about him. Therefore, I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that as a result of this investigation, I may have something to write. For I think it is unreasonable to send on a prisoner without specifying the charges against him.
Okay, welcome back. We are in Acts chapter 25, and you know, how did that last 2 years go for you? Because between chapter 24 and chapter 25, 2 years has taken place, and we're getting a bit of a changing of the guard here. We come into chapter 25, and we have Festus, who is now taking over for Felix. Now, Paul's still where Paul is, but Festus comes, and he is now in charge, and he's taken an inspection tour around his new abode, I guess you could say. So we find him not in Caesarea, but we find him in Jerusalem. Now, I guess, Gary, to start out with, what happened to Felix? Where'd he go?
Yeah, we talked about how he did not get a very high rating from the historians like Tacitus and Suetonius. They thought he was kind of a lowlife in high position. He married up and married well and had good friends. And he was a rags to riches story, that's for sure. But in the Roman Empire, that could have meant lots of deceit and self-serving. But I don't know the guy, so I don't want to talk too bad of him. But certainly the people that knew him had some interesting things to say. And evidently there was trouble with the Jewish and Gentile populations in Caesarea itself, right there in that administrative capital city for Judea and areas around. So, and he was evidently, many thought, unnecessarily violent with the Jewish part of that struggle. And so the emperor at the time is Emperor Nero, and Nero actually removes him from there. We don't know where he ended up after that, but Nero at the time, his first 5 years in office, he was considered quite a good emperor, and probably because he was under the mentorship of Seneca, who was has become a famous leader in the Roman Empire, and he was a philosopher and a writer, and so left a legacy that way. And there was another person called Burrus, who I'm less familiar with, but anyway, those two gave him great counsel. The first 5 years, everybody really thought he was an excellent leader, and this is at the cusp of that first 5 years, and so this guy evidently couldn't do the job, didn't please the local population like they hoped, and they did yank him. And then they bring in Festus, and Festus is the new governor. There's not Suetonius, Tacitus, a lot of these Roman historians don't write about him, but Josephus does. He would have considered himself a Roman historian and a Jewish historian. And Josephus considers him to be one of the most honorable and capable leaders to be there. And he'll go on for 3 years there. And unfortunately, he dies of natural causes while he's there. So I'm sure they would have appreciated if he could have hung around for a little longer and done the great job he was doing, but it wasn't to be. And so, but anyway, so we have Festus, and you and I were talking beforehand. We were impressed with his abilities, and that he comes on the scene. He arrives in Caesarea, but 3 days after arriving, after kind of moving in, I guess, getting his room set up and the stuff, he's off to Jerusalem. He's off on tour. He's going to see and meet the main people here. He stays there for about a week and a half, and then comes back to Caesarea. And it looks like he was doing that eyeball tour, or we'd call it a windshield tour today, of seeing the lay of the land, meeting the main characters and people that he's going to be working with for the next untold number of years, and seems like a really capable leader as the story unfolds and the testimony is about him and the way he does this.
Well, and I mean, he does seem very wise. I mean, when you come to a new post, the first thing that a good leader wants to do is go out and see what's going on yourself, because just hearing about it doesn't show you anything. And he goes to Jerusalem, and obviously he meets with the leaders there. He meets with the chief priest, and interestingly enough, they have not in 2 years settled down at all about Paul.
Oh.
And there's not only have they not settled down about Paul, that's they bring it up, and want Paul to come to them so that they can do their thing. And, at the same time, apparently they still have this plot to ambush him in their back pocket just in case they do let him come back down to Jerusalem. So very interesting there. But we see Festus do something really intelligent, which is he doesn't make a call right away. What does he do?
Well, he kind of right on the spot. It's interesting because they show it. They're talking to him while he's walking up the stairs. Like you see people talking to senators in the hall, or people, as they're going from one place to another. And he is wise enough to say, we can talk about this, but not here. And I'm not going to make any decisions right now. Why don't you meet me in Caesarea and bring, or even come back to Caesarea with me if you want, and we'll sit down and talk about it there. And
yeah, because quite honestly, he probably doesn't know who the heck Paul is when they ask him that question.
No.
I'm sure
he may know because Paul's in his house,
yeah.
but may not know the big story. It doesn't sound like he talked to him or anything like that. So.
Oh no! So he probably has a counselor there, or somebody, and I can just see it.
Yes.
Who's Paul?
In fact, they talk about that here, where at one point the counselors thought. Yeah. Yeah, it's this kind of, he's this guy Felix left here.
Yeah, and
he left him for you to take care of.
and that, we're going to get to that where he Festus sort of says, my predecessor left me a problem. He just left this guy sitting here.
Sure, but he left him a Roman citizen.
Yes.
So he probably knew that much as well, and knew that's why he was still there, and so he needed to find out more about this, because his duty to the Roman jurisprudence system and the citizenship system was above whatever was going on there. So his balancing act was very delicate, and his predecessor had already had trouble with the Jewish population and being able to negotiate things. And so this is a wise move to kind of not make a rash judgment when you don't know the details, and just put some brakes on it, find out more, and then go to a better decision.
So after he spends 8 or 10, he spends a while down there.
We're not exact there, he's
not exact there. Yeah. So what happened?
Over a week.
Well, he says 8 or 10 days. It's like, okay.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
But he doesn't. When he gets back to Caesarea, apparently it feels like, as you read the story, it makes sense that he brought people down. These people that from the high priest that wanted to go after Paul. They must have come with him, because it says on the next day he took his seat and ordered Paul to be brought in, and the Jews are there, standing around him.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting how they say that? You get Festus in the judgment seat, and that tribune seat is the bema seat. Very interesting word there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's sitting in that judgment seat, and you just imagine all these Jews standing around Paul. It's like, is this Brutus and his gang, or they're about ready to stab him or something? I don't know.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure he was, kind of looking over his shoulder in some ways too.
Oh
See what's
yeah,
going on. I'm sure he knew these people.
yeah. So so Festus, asks some questions, and Paul gives some very. It's sort of like every other speech that he gives. It's very long-winded, has a lot of detail to it. Is that right?
No, you're thinking of something else.
Oh,
Chris.
okay. Must be a different chapter.
That's the next chapter.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for setting me up there. Yeah, this was so after all of us having read to this point in the book of Acts, Paul is extraordinarily brief. He one sentence for the first answer. I mean, really, Paul, one sentence to answer something, that's very unusual, but he's brief and to the point. And he just says, they give him permission to make his defense, and his defense is one sentence: I haven't done anything wrong. But he says it in three ways: I haven't done anything wrong with the law of the Jews, against the temple, or against Caesar.
Yep.
So he's specific, but he's very brief. That's it. And then Festus asks another question: are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me? And I'm sure, again, he's trying to keep the Roman law and respect Paul's citizenship and jurisprudence rights, but he's trying to make friends with the Jews because his predecessor had been kicked out because of his inability to keep things. So he gives them a little concession here. I'll travel to Jerusalem again. Are you willing to go there, Paul? And he may not have even known whether Paul was willing to or not. Maybe Paul has more friends there and it'd be better to have a trial there. We don't, he didn't know, but Paul says, no way. I'm here in Caesar's court. This is where I'm getting a fair trial, and maybe not even here. I want to go to see Caesar. Since this is Caesar's court, this is Roman law. I want to go to the top. And he makes that, kind of pulls this hip pocket move again. If you were playing cards, or a game of skill and intellect, you wouldn't want to play against Paul, because he knows how to play his cards and hold his cards until the right moment, and he does it here, not knowing, if he was going to end up in Jerusalem, he'd probably end up dead again, because they're going to go after him. He's already had the plot that they foiled previously, and so yeah, this is amazing little thing here, but it's a short answer again. Nope, I'm not doing that. I want to go to Caesar.
Well, and what's amazing, you read this exchange, and then you look at like the House of Representatives, or when they're doing these open testifying meetings, and you see it today, where you've got all the health experts testifying, and you see the guy answer the House representative or the senator sitting there, and as soon as the senator gets an answer like that, he turns to his parliamentarian behind him and said, "What am I going to do with this?" So I see,
right.
I see Festus
exactly.
sitting there, and Paul.
So that's what he does.
Yeah, Paul's sitting there going, "This is the court. I'm a Roman citizen. I appeal to Caesar." And Festus is like,
I didn't expect that.
What do I do with this one?
Yeah, so he pulls away from the mic and goes over and confers with the parliamentarians there, and supposedly the counselors were people who knew the Roman law along with and knew the local stuff as well. And they often even had law students with them. They were mentoring, so it was an interesting group of people.
I think I must have said something close to "Hey Siri" because my phone just started talking.
Woo!
It told me just a moment, and I'm like, I didn't ask anything. Anyway,
Caesar, Siri, that could go.
Could be.
So and like you said, here's a decision.
Fine.
They finally make a decision. If you want to go to Caesar you will go.
Yes. I mean, here we've been sitting for
No
2
more
years.
waffling.
Yeah, two plus years. Uh, uh, Paul's testified and gave his testimony to multiple people and multiple groups at this point, and finally, somebody says, "All right, you want to go to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go," and that sort of breaks it up. That sort of breaks up the group.
Absolutely. You can imagine the talk at the table there with the counselors and all. You're kicking the problem upstairs again, like Lysias did earlier, and sent it up to his boss, the governor, Felix at the time. He didn't necessarily need to make that decision. Let somebody, with more authority than I step into this. And so here's these guys with Festus saying, well, Felix couldn't fix it. And they know that. And that's why Felix got removed. So maybe this is something we should send off to the emperor so he sees what's going on down here. He's okay. You want to go? You can go. And he wipes his hands of the mess as well.
Well, think about it. I mean, Festus is sitting in the catbird seat in a little bit because the Jews, they can't blame Festus for sending him away now, because he made that call. Paul made that call as a Roman citizen, and Festus is like, I can't do anything but respect that call. If he's appealing to
really
Caesar,
could. That's correct.
Great. Problem solved. Except,
Though we accept, yeah.
except, we find out that he gets some visitors.
Yeah.
And this makes perfect sense. He's just arrived on the scene, new to the post, and now King Agrippa and someone else, Bernice, come to pay him a visit. And it seems like we get into, how would one say it? A bit of a drinking party, maybe? I mean, the video I thought showed it very, very well. They're sitting around for
drinking and dancing girls and musicians.
Yeah, it's great. And so Festus,
it's a night in Austin, basically, on 6th Street, right?
More.
More.
All closed. But let's take this sort of apart one piece at a time. First of all, who's Agrippa and who's Bernice? Loaded question. Go ahead and answer that.
Sure. And Agrippa is a Herod Agrippa II. He is the son of Agrippa I. We met earlier in the book, who came to an untimely death with the worms eating him. If you remember that, a lot of people will remember that dramatic death when he kind of proclaimed himself to be divine and at a big Roman festival that was attended by people from all over the Mediterranean, and he dies just a few days later, so it wasn't too cool. But he was the person who ordered the execution of James of Zebedee. And then he orders the arrest, and he's going to plan to execute Peter, two of the 4 inner circle people with Jesus. So this is what his dad did. Now, he wasn't around for it, because it's interesting, Agrippa II was raised in Rome. Many of the Herods were sent to Rome to be educated and to become friends with the people who would eventually become emperors or people in the Roman Senate. So they were well connected, but now he's been sent back after his father died, and he's now gaining a lot of territories. They gave him a small place to begin with. He did well, and he's been now given the title of king again back, which had not been the title most of them had, or at least he was able to use it. And so he is also the brother of the former governor's wife. Remember, Drusilla in chapter 24 is there with Felix. It's Governor Felix's wife, well connected. And Herod Agrippa II, the same way, in that he's not only a Herod, so he's not only royalty from that end, but that the Romans kind of created, but he's also royalty in the Jewish world, because they were from a Hasmonean mother. Yeah. And so that it's pretty amazing to be in the Jewish royal line from that era, from a couple hundred years before, kind of a high point where the Jews were able to rule again in their part of the world. So, or at least have a dynasty. Yeah. So interesting person, but really lots of speculation for the last 2,000 years about Bernice, who accompanies him here. They don't tell us who she is, so you have to read the historians of the day, because they know about Agrippa II and Bernice. And Bernice is also the daughter of Herod Agrippa I. She's the sister of Drusilla. They're a year apart. Herod Agrippa II and Bernice are 1 year apart, and they've now been together for 10 years. And the rumors are, well, you can imagine. There are those who at the time believed there was an incestuous relationship going on there. And the video doesn't show it all the way, but it does give us a hint as he's kind of affectionately accompanying her downstairs or upstairs or wherever they're going, or giving her those little glances, knowing glances.
So are you saying they were close?
They were more than close. They might, well, there is that saying about knowing each other in a biblical way, and that was the belief, or the rumors, heavy rumors then. And if you've ever done any reading or watched a special, or if you ever watched I, Claudius back from PBS, I think you can still watch that series about that particular emperor around this time. That was not out of the ordinary. That was not unusual, if you will. Now in the Jewish lands, yes, that was pretty unusual, and that was not well thought about. But in the Roman culture of the time, in Rome particularly, anything was going on, and it was just going downhill and worse, because that's where Nero's emperorship took it. Eventually, whatever happened, he kind of went over the deep end. Yeah. And all that kind of stuff, sexual immorality and all the sexual mores even of that day were thrown out the window. And so this is not unusual behavior, but it's interesting, because if you read about her later, well, first of all, Herod Agrippa II never married. Yeah. And so this was the relationship. He couldn't marry her, but they had this ability to be close family. But she will later fall in love with both Vespasian and Titus, two of the Roman generals, and Titus will take her back to Rome, and only because it's such a scandalous relationship will he have to send her back to the Jewish homeland, heartbroken. So she's an interesting person. She had an interesting history, and but yeah, this is one of the more sordid possibilities that was going on there. But you hate to cast aspersions if it wasn't true. There's no proof, but certainly evidently people that were right there were thinking it. So.
Yeah, as we'd say, it is what it is.
Yeah. So again, just like with Felix, where Paul's talking about self-control and he's talking about righteousness and all this good stuff, he's going to have the same audience here in Herod Agrippa, in that, you know, well, they've been bending the rules for a long time, and
that's I'm pretty sure it's breaking them, but bending. Okay.
Yeah.
well, to keep it, you know, G or PG rated, this
Amen.
this conversation is actually between Festus and Agrippa and Bernice is actually a very interesting one, because you're really getting Festus's sort of understanding of what he's been told. So we're sort of getting a commentary on what he's heard over the last 2 weeks or so. And it's basically, hey, this is, I don't see anything wrong here. This is a point of disagreement with the Jews, and I love this, and about a dead man.
And about a dead man. A dead man named Jesus.
Who Paul asserts to be alive. And I'm in Paul's camp. I assert him to be alive also. so and
Amen. So do I.
Yep, there you go. So what we find out that is, I think, hilarious is Paul has said, I want to be sent to Caesar. I want to be judged by Caesar. And Agrippa's like, Festus is like, to Caesar you want to go? That's where you're going. And then Festus is sitting here admitting, I have to tell the emperor why I'm sending this guy, and I've got no clue of what's going on here. Can you please help me? And that appeal is sort of...
And Herod does, and Agrippa does.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he'll say, well, I'd like to hear this guy too. I'm interested. Bring him on, and let's have an audience with him.
I mean, the very bad part of my mind is going, hey, I've killed a bunch of these guys before. Let me see him. Maybe I'll kill him too. I mean, you just get that. But the one thing it does harken back to is it's very similar in Jesus's last week, where it's like we got a Herod going, hey, do some tricks for me. I want to hear what you have to say. And it's very reminiscent, sort of like a little echo of when Jesus was there.
Yeah, that's Herod Agrippa II's grandfather, Herod Antipater, who does that once he gets sent Jesus, and he wants to hear what he has to say, maybe see a miracle or two, and doesn't happen. So he just says, not my bother, send him off back to Pilate.
So Festus is like, you shall hear him tomorrow,
Yeah, mañana. And it's true.
and so tomorrow is here, and we get to verse 23.
Oh, yeah.
And, the way that Luke writes this, I just am thinking of like Las Vegas or Mardi Gras, where Herod and Bernice, they make an entrance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's not like they just walk into the room and sit down. We have great pomp.
Great pomp.
So talk and in this special room too. Entering the auditorium, accompanied by everybody. So this is not just a, hey, let's sit down and talk. Tell me your story. This is
red carpet stuff, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
This is the red carpet there, because the word for pomp in the Greek is the word fantasia.
Yep.
And if you've ever seen the Disney animation of Fantasia, all the color and all the hoop and holler in that grand movie, that's what's going on here. They are coming, again, setting that scene as you're doing. We've got a new governor, Festus. He doesn't know everybody in the city yet. The king wants to meet the new governor, so he comes with his partner, and then Festus decides to make this the party of the season, and invites all the big names in Caesarea. So, you know, it tells us all the leading officers, all the leading men of the city, and I'm sure they brought their partners along with them, and they have one big do. And they make a parade out of it. Evidently, Herod Agrippa and Bernice are not going to be outdone by anybody. And in fact, they're probably going to show off having been raised in Rome. They know how the Romans do it, having been in Rome. So they're going to, you know, bring off that royalty and pomp and circumstance that was part of the Roman culture in Rome as well. So.
When I grew up in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, they had what was known as the Mummers Parade.
Oh, yeah.
On New Year's Day. And basically, it's a bunch of grown men. The story goes that they created the Mummers Parade to get all the drunks off the street on New Year's Eve, because they had to all do the parade. But they are in feathers, big, colorful, you know, costumes. I'm sort of thinking that this is what we're seeing here. It's a Mummers Parade, where they're walking down the street with their big hats, their big feathers, their plumes and everything. You know, they walk up in grand fashion, trumpets playing, you know, everybody being announced. And that's how we sort of end this chapter, which is everyone has come into the room. Everyone has been announced, and they're all sitting down, and then they bring Paul out.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because you know, Paul's kind of one of the main events, it seems, for gathering everybody there, and having spent 2 years there, and he doesn't remember he had some freedom. There are important people in the city already who are Christians. We knew that Cornelius, who was the centurion there in charge of things going on in Caesarea, a major port and Roman, you know, provincial place, at least for that area of the world. There's Philip had lived there with his daughters, probably a little more humbly, but everybody in between. There's a larger Christian community there, and so there's that group of people. And with Paul not being shy about being places where there's lots of people or lots of people to talk to Christ about, he may have a reputation that goes on before him, and so they at least pick an interesting time for Agrippa for Agrippa to be there, for the king and his wife. But remember, they're Jewish, and they're both of Jewish royal descent, so they know what's going on, and their family history has interacted with this movement for generations now. This would be like the 4th generation that's been interacting here, and so they know it. They know about it. They know about the way, as we'll find out. But Festus has this great line that when everybody's settled down, and he brings Paul out, and he says, you know, this guy is, everybody is asking for his death. The whole Jewish community has petitioned me, whether it's in Jerusalem or here in Caesarea. They're shouting that he shouldn't live any longer. But you know what? I talked to him, and I find nothing wrong. I don't find anything deserving death. And so he said he wants to go to Rome. I'm going to send him to Rome. So everybody finds out about the decision there. If they didn't know about it before, they know now. And then I see it as a mix of like sarcasm and a rhetorical question. But okay, everybody, help me out here. I got a prisoner here I inherited from the previous governor, and he's been at the Sanhedrin. He's been here, and I don't have anything to write about what he's done wrong for me to send him to the Caesar for if there's all these appeals,
Yeah.
what are we appealing? You know, what's at the basis of this? Help me out, everybody, because I don't want to have nothing to write. You know, it's kind of like the teacher writing a hall pass to the principal and saying, "I'm sending you Billy here." But you don't say why you're sending Billy there. You know, he's been bad, but we don't say, there's no specifics. You know,
I'm sending you to the school office to see the principal. Tell him what you did.
Yeah, exactly. And that usually doesn't float with the principal. They're like, okay, tell me what you did.
You know, I think the NIV waters it down. And it's funny because I looked at some of the other versions and it does the same thing. It says, I think it unreasonable to send him. I love the NASB. It seems absurd to me.
Absurd, yeah.
Absurd. You know, that's so much more powerful than unreasonable. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where we leave. That's where we leave off today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know,
the absurdity of it all.
The absurdity of it all. And
in a just man's decision.
Yeah.
And there's been a series of people all along the way thinking that you have one group, as he kind of sums it up in a few sentences right here. You have one group that wants to kill the guy.
Yeah.
And you have this other group that keeps passing him on because no one really can figure out what he did that deserves such emotion.
Oh.
And such rage. And wow, it's an interesting contrast. And to ask this group of important people, okay, here's your chance. You know, what do I say? What do I put on the note?
And think about Festus. He's bringing together the king, all right, along with all of the commanders and leaders of this area, of the Caesarea. And it is like sort of this absurd joke. It's like, everyone wants to kill him. We don't know why. Pass out the drinks, bring out the snacks, and let him talk. You know?
Well, and interestingly enough, the Sanhedrin wasn't invited to this one.
No.
You know, we don't know who the leading officials of the city are. We don't know. We know some of the personalities that have been the leading officers in the Roman army. So he's actually presenting this. The only people that probably have any idea of what's possibly going on, because they've had experience with the way, like I said, this is their fourth generation of folks dealing with it, is Agrippa II and Bernice. Everybody else would see it more like the Roman way, and that's like, well, what's the big deal? Let the guy go.
Yeah, so this is a cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger, end of chapter.
End of chapter. You know,
only because of the length of this story did people 1,000 years ago decide this is where this chapter should end.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not done.
Right. Because the next line in 26:1 is, and then Agrippa says to Paul, well, you have permission to speak. Go ahead and speak. And this time, Paul's not extraordinarily brief. And that's why they took another chapter.
Yeah, well, not only is he not brief, but again, we've gotten this story before. You know, the story that we're about to hear, he has now said multiple times, but you might want to get 3 Bibles out when we get ready for the tomorrow. And that is, get chapter 26 of Acts, open one Bible, sit it there. Get chapter 22 Acts, open that baby up, sit it there. Get chapter 9 of Acts, open that Bible there. And you know what? Grab a 4th Bible. Grab Galatians. Put that one there too, Galatians 1. Because what happens is we now have 3 accounts with a little bit of information from Galatians of Paul telling this story again. And honestly, if you look at all of where this is written, if you're like me, the one that's in my mind of Paul's conversion is not when it happened back in chapter 9. It's here in front of Agrippa and Festus that we think about, because there's lines that you hear in chapter 26 that don't show up in the other accounts. It's great. It's amazing. So grab 4 Bibles. That's your assignment for tonight. Grab 4 Bibles and set them all out. So there you go. We have finished chapter 26, and it's a cliffhanger. Or what are we? Chapter 25. We've finished, and it's a cliffhanger going into chapter.
Sitting on the edge of 26.
You're going to be.
I might suggest, if you don't have 4 Bibles, go knock on neighbors' doors and see if you can borrow a Bible, because that's a great opportunity to start a spiritual conversation. They're going to ask you, really? You need a Bible? What do you need a Bible for?
Not only
they're going to say, I don't have a Bible, and you'll know what to get them for their birthday or Christmas.
Well, when you go and knock on the door and ask them for their Bible, if they have one, then grab both the Bible and them.
There you go. Have them come back tomorrow.
Yep. Now you can just social distance and wear a mask or something, but it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But there you go. It's going to keep you up all night long. I'm telling you right now, you're going to stay up all night long going, what is going to happen? What is Paul going to say? So there you go.
They might even read ahead.
Not a bad idea. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the Thunderbirds yesterday. And if anyone won the $1 million by watching the complete video yesterday, if you didn't, you have to watch the complete video to see where you can win the $1 million. But with that, would you like to end in prayer?
Sure. Well, I'm going to ask you this. I always give you a chance during the week to pray us up yourself. So how about it, Chris?
I can do that. Lord, thank you just for what we see you do, the things that you do to put all of the pieces together in such a way that they make sense for your glory. And Lord, help us to understand that in our own lives, that when we're in the midst of just things that don't make sense, that we know that everything makes sense because you orchestrate those for your glory. So Lord, thank you for this message of Paul. Thank you for his boldness to stand there and talk about your death, your resurrection, and this man that other people think are dead, but Paul proclaims in a loud voice that he is alive, and that is Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior. So Lord, protect everybody as they go through their day, and we look forward to when we can come back together and learn more about you and live for you. In Jesus' name,
Jesus'
amen.
name. Amen.
All
Thanks,
right.
Chris.
We will see you tomorrow.
Sounds good.